Have you been asked to perform one of three things? Configuration management, change control, or been involved in record keeping? Well, in this session, you're going to learn what these three things are and how important they are to not only systems engineering in general, but also to developing a product at reduced cost and on schedule. Now, first, what these do is that these communicate to the team what is the current design, and it also limits changes to avoid the problem of one team thinking we're on version 2 of a prototype and another team thinking we're on version 3, and then not having their work meet in the middle. That's going to cause overruns, it's going to cost rework, it'll at the very least be a waste of time. So that's what we're trying to avoid and move toward a project where everyone's on the same page, everyone's using the same drawing, and everyone's checking out code if you're on a software project that is the current version, and you're not updating an old version of the code which had since been revised and now it's over here, and then things get off track very quickly. So smooth project is what we're going for. Now, configuration management. This manages the configuration of the product. It could be software, it could be hardware, it could be in the form of a document repository. Years ago, decades ago, they'd have these large rooms where they'd have a crypt, a drawing crypt, where you'd go, you'd ask the attendant for the right drawing. They'd go to these large file cabinets and they'd pick out the right drawer, and then either they'd give you a copy of the drawing, or they could identify which drawing you wanted and then reproduce a copy. And then they'd give you a paper copy. You take it back to the desk and you make your changes and then return it to the crypt. Now, it's all done electronically today, but the configuration management just tells everyone this is the latest version. That's so important because if you start revising the wrong version, you lose track of revisions and it's a mess. Sometimes they call this ground truth. What is the ground truth of what we're trying to build? It doesn't have to be done yet. We just have to know what is the accurate version. The next one is change control. You can imagine how chaotic it'd be if anyone can make any kind of change at any time. Even if we had configuration management, if a lead engineer can't keep track of all the changes happening, they don't know what to change next, and then the product just drifts. So change control regulates that to where if you have changes, depending on what part of the program you're in, you would have a review board. They'd review the changes, they'd say, yeah, these are good, let's approve them, and then once they're approved, then the drawing's revised, it's submitted to the repository. In the old days, you'd have a drafter, would make the new drawing and then put the new drawing in the crypt or in the file system. And then it's part of what's called the baseline. So change control very much ties in with configuration management. Now, the record keeping comes into play where we want to track all this activity. So let's say we make a change, it's approved, but somehow we want to go back to an older version, we made a mistake, or we didn't think about the fact that our power supply isn't as large, just making that up. Well, with record keeping, we can roll back to different versions, and then, again, maintaining configuration management, we could still go back to a previous change, we could remove changes, and then go back to something that we know worked and that didn't break the power supply or the other system. So this record keeping gives us a lot of flexibility in making changes and putting it in the baseline, knowing we can roll back. And then also at the end of the project, we can have a record of the types of changes we made, so we can either show our customer if they're interested, or just have our own records of what our engineering decisions were at each point. This could be very helpful from a legal perspective. If there's heaven forbid, a fault with our product, we could show we did due diligence by keeping track of configuration management, keeping track of changes. We could say we addressed certain concerns that came up to the change board, and then we decided to make a change or not. That's all kept in the record keeping. There are other types of records that programmatic records, which can be good to keep a track of. Sometimes the engineering staff is not as involved. You might not be quite involved in tracking programmatic changes, for instance. If you're a lead engineer, you'll need to be aware of it. But for records, we do need to ask, what's the type of record? That will often drive how long we need to retain it. We don't want to retain everything for 100 years. Consult your organization on the retention schedule, is what that's called. What we need to retain for how long. Now for change control, a lot of times you need to ask, when do we need to make the change? A lot of times it's right away, but not always. What is the actual change? What drawing get revised? What requirements get revised? And then sometimes, how much is it going to cost? What's the time impact? What's the schedule impact? We want to ask these for when we want to make changes. But when we enforce discipline in this area, and particularly if you're involved in this, as a new systems engineer, they might ask you, sit in on a change board, or, get the current drawing, learn the configuration management system. But by doing this as a program, we're going to be able to do things in an efficient way, and we're not going to lose time asking ourselves, is this the right drawing? Am I revising the right set of requirements? Am I designing to the right set of requirements? Maybe they changed on me. And it's going to avoid a lot of rework when we do this. Super important. If you're involved in this, know it is a very critical task to the success of the overall project or program. And if you don't see this happening, if you see gaps, I urge you to bring it up with your leadership on how adding this, bringing that extra rigor can really save time downstream. Comment below or message me directly if this resonates with you or if you have other questions. Otherwise, I will see you in the next session.